All right. So today's speaker is Dr. Gillian Folger, an emeritus professor at Durham University in the UK. Dr. Folger holds degrees from Cambridge University and Durham University. For the past several years, she has been exploring alternatives to the generally accepted deep mantle plume model for volcanic hotspots, which actually doesn't explain all the geologic features we see at hotspots. She's also a managing editor of Earth Science Reviews and a contributor to the website mantleplumes.org. This topic is of special interest to the Pacific Northwest, with its extensive volcanic deposits attributed to the passage of the Yellowstone hotspot, as well as to the participants in AWG's upcoming Iceland field trips. So Dr. Folger will focus this presentation on those two areas. With that, I'll turn it over to Dr. Folger. You're muted. Okay. Hang on. Full screen. Jillian, you're muted. Can you get yourself unmuted? Because I can't unmute you. Oh dear.
I apologize for this. I put my pointer in laser pointer mode, and it would not behave as a mouse then, so it wasn't obeying my mouse clicks, but sorry. We'll start all over again. Okay. You may need to go to the menu item and say fit to screen, so that the presentation mode doesn't spill off the edges of your screen. Can everybody hear me at a good volume? Is the volume good? Okay.
Yep,
well,
it's good.
Thank you very much indeed, Marsha, for inviting me to give this talk, and it's a great honor to give it to you, and I'm very happy to meet you all. So Marsha asked me to talk about Iceland and Yellowstone, and she told me she'd done her homework and looked at the mantle-plumes.org and looked at some of my recent work, but she was still not 100% sure about our ideas. So I kind of try my best, but I get this message from quite a lot of directions that sometimes we haven't succeeded in making it clear enough exactly what our position is. So I started off by, I've divided this talk into 4 parts. I'm going to give a very short summary of what the plates versus plumes controversy is and what our position is. Then I'm going to show some slides about Iceland. Then I'm going to show a section on Yellowstone, and then I'm going to have a wrap up. I'm hoping to allow lots of time for questions, because this is a massive, massive subject. I've been working on it for 20 years now at very high intensity, and it's so cross-disciplinary, and the plume hypothesis is so entrenched. Many scientists think that it's settled science, is the expression that's been used, and therefore it's hands-off. So if you make a challenge to it, it's not enough just to produce a seismic tomography picture or some geochemical results. There's always somebody who will say, well, what about the geodesy? What about the uplift? What about temperature estimates? What about this? What about that? What about the time progressive trail? And so in order to defend any alternative theory, you have to just look into all these things and become some kind of Jill of all trades of these subjects. So I've been working on this for 20 years. I run the website mantleplumes.org, and I put quite a lot of work into that to encourage cross-disciplinary scientists to post material on it, which is accessible to cross-disciplinary scientists. So, you know, a lot of stuff, for example, if you're an earthquake seismologist, geochemistry may be beyond your comprehension and vice versa. So I work very hard to try to get people to present summaries of their work, which we can all understand. Anyway, so I suppose what I'm trying to say is that I'm going to give a very quick whistle-stop tour through some interesting points on Iceland and Yellowstone, and I want to allow lots of time for questions, because if I fill up all the time, I'm sure many of you will still have questions in your mind. And okay, let's get on with it. So the two hypotheses can be summarized by this slide here. On the left is the schematic of the plate hypothesis, and on the right, the plume hypothesis. So the plume hypothesis, let's see if I can dare to get my laser pointer up again. The plume hypothesis essentially says volcanic areas on the surface where we think we see more volcanism. You know, there's an excess of volcanism, so it needs a special explanation. The plume hypothesis suggests that a hot diapir rises up, impinges on the base of the lithosphere, domes it up, and volcanism bursts out, and volcanism then continues as long as the feeder is in place. So this is a kind of bottom-driven hypothesis, which suggests that the lithosphere is not really involved. It might have some influence, but it's not the driving force. And basically, convection in the mantle is driving a lithosphere which is just responsive. The alternative hypothesis is the exact opposite, that it's the lithosphere that's the active element. The lithosphere is going into extension, and it's permitting pre-existing melt to rise up and spill out onto the surface. So in this hypothesis, the mantle is the passive feature and the lithosphere is the active feature. In the plume hypothesis, people often go about it by seeing some volcanism and saying, okay, let's do mantle tomography, something like this, and look for what's going on in the mantle. They do their experiment, and then they come up with some kind of theory. Oh, the mantle's flowing this way, the mantle's flowing that way, the mantle's doing this, and that's why we have volcanism here. So they view explaining surface volcanism as basically mapping what's going on in the mantle. You find out what's happening in the mantle, and that should explain what's on the surface. However, the plate hypothesis says, no, that's irrelevant. What we should be doing is mapping the dynamics of the lithosphere. We should be using structural geology. We should look upon the distribution of volcanism as telling us where diking is going on, where extension has gone on and permitted volcanism to occur, and that it's not the mantle that's driving things, and mantle structure to a large extent is not relevant. So I'm just simply going to show you this one picture, which is from the original hypothesis of when the plumes were suggested originally, which came from 1971, when Jason Morgan, in a short paper in Nature, he proposed, he was driven by observations from Hawaii. Okay, so we saw that there was something funny going on there, and Jason suggested that Hawaii wasn't a one-off. It was actually a general thing, and that there were many areas on Earth where there's an excess of volcanism, and that there are many. This comes from the deep mantle, he suggested, and he presented this diagram here where he proposed where the main ones were. And if you look at these, you can see that 2/3 of them are on or very close to spreading plate boundaries. Iceland, the Azores, Extension, Tristan da Cunha, Bouvet, Marion, Kerguelen, Afar, Galapagos, Bowie, and Easter. So just in the very, very, very first picture that was ever produced suggesting these things, there's an obvious connection with extension and plate tectonics. 2/3 of them lie on the plate tectonic extensional plate boundary. So quickly on to Iceland. And congratulations to those of you who are going there for a field trip. I might bump into you in September because I've kind of planning going there to collect some samples for zircon dating. Although having heard all this chat about COVID, I'm not going to commit myself too early. So I just downloaded this off Google Earth this morning, and so this is just a bathymetric map. So of course here we see Iceland in the middle, Greenland, Scandinavia, and Britain, and the blue of course shows the bathymetry of the sea floor. So here we see the current spreading plate boundary, the Mons Ridge, the Kolbeinse Ridge, the Reykjanes Ridge, and the pale blue color, most of that is just submerged continental crust. So here we have the North Sea. This is underlain by continental crust, just flooded with seawater. And here we have the continental edge of Britain. This is the continental edge of Norway. Over here we have the continental edges of Greenland. This area here is also continental. This is the Rockall Bank. These areas to the north are also underlain by continent. This is the Faroes Plateau, the Faroe Plateau. This is a continental block. And the area, I thought I should also mention that there's a continental microcontinent here. This is uncontroversial. This is the Jan Mayen microcontinent. And the area that is kind of debated, is it a plume or not, is this area here, the Faroe-Iceland Ridge, shallow, the region around Iceland, Iceland itself, and the Iceland-Greenland Ridge. So, you know, this to me kind of says a lot too. All of this shallow stuff here, this is all underlain by continental material. And yet we're asked to accept that this kind of relatively minor part of it is peculiar oceanic crust. People have published many papers with different kind of color schemes, and sometimes this just jumps out of the page at you. You know that this region here is anomalous, but this is also anomalous. This is anomalous. This is anomalous. And my colleagues and I, just to jump to the end point, we recently proposed that this area is continental also, that it's continuous with the known Jan Mayen microcontinent to the north. It's continuous with the Hatton Bank, the Rockall Bank, and these regions here in the Faroe block, which are, as I say, known and accepted as being continental. And we termed the whole thing Icelandia in order to get a bit of attention to it, because we've discovered that there are two ways of kind of combating a theory that you don't like. One is to rebut it, which we would very much like to have done, and the other is to ignore it, which is just annoying. So we tried to make a bit of noise about this, and it attracted quite a lot of press and media attention, to the extent that even a lawmaker in Iceland was tweeting about it. So I guess we succeeded. So I'm now going to give you an explanation as to why we have proposed this radical model. You know, I suppose people sometimes think we're just troublemakers or crazy or something like this, but this is not the case. Many eminent scientists, many who are in leadership positions in European and North American universities have signed up to this. And we don't propose this lightly, because we know that you know, this is just going to bring us a bundle of trouble. We propose it because we truly see that the simple, hot diapir plume model cannot explain the observations that we have made. And we as a group, we probably have thousands of years of experience. Well, maybe that's exaggeration. Let's say hundreds of years of experience researching in this area. I myself have been researching this area for 40 years, and there are others who have done the same. And there may be 20 or 30 of us who are all signed up to this theory. So this diagram shows the situation immediately prior to the Northeast Atlantic breaking up at approximately 54 million years. So everything you see on this diagram is continental at this point. No oceanic crust has formed. This black line shows the line of nascent continental breakup, and the pink areas shows the continental regions which are flooded with volcanism at the time this area was just about to break up. So when you look at maps of the Northeast Atlantic with Iceland sticking stuff there in the middle, it gives the impression that there's a very wide ocean here and there's a huge expanse. This all must be underlain by oceanic crust. But in fact, there's a vast amount of submerged continental crust in this region, which is shown here. There was, even before any oceanic crust formed, there was a very long distance between northwest Scotland and what is now the coast of Greenland. So when the Northeast Atlantic broke up, it didn't just break up, like we kind of tell school children that the two sides pop apart and new crust is formed in the middle. It broke up by ridges that formed and propagated, and it broke up bit by bit. So the first place where we see true oceanic crust forming is in this position here, and rifting started at this point here, and it propagated south over about 2 million years. So spoiler alert, this is the region where Iceland later formed. When it had reached this position here, the Reykjanes Ridge propagated very quickly to the north and terminated at approximately this point here. And thereafter, oceanic crust started to form about the Reykjanes Ridge here and this ridge here, which is called the Eyre Ridge. And it's unclear what happened in the middle here because the magnetic anomalies, which I'll show you shortly, are very unclear. We do know, however, that this point here, the northernmost tip of the Reykjanes Ridge, is some 50, maybe 100 kilometers west of this point here. So some sort of, in a simple world, this would have formed like this with a transform 50 to 100 kilometers long and then continued on down there. But there is no evidence for such a transform. Something else happened. So here we have a very simplistic picture of the current situation. This is the ridge that formed first, the Eyre Ridge. And so this is pronounced I-ear, like your eye and your ear, Icelandic spelling. So it propagated south. And as you can see on my previous slide, I kind of underemphasized the amount of hooking here. It's obviously radically changed direction by almost 90 degrees and hooks into some structure here. And here, of course, is the northern tip of the Reykjanes Ridge. And you can see what the lateral offset of that is. For scale, from this westernmost point of Iceland to the easternmost point is 450 kilometers. So the Eyre Ridge was active for some 20 million years, and then it started to dwindle. It opened in a fan-shaped manner, so it's wider. The ocean basin it formed is wider here than it is here. It kind of pinches out to almost nothing. And there was complementary extension in this southernmost part of the Jan Mayen microcontinent here. So it was kind of opening. The Eyre Ridge was, let me see if I can do this here, it was opening like this, and the other one was opening like that. Upside down, maybe. So at the time when this was going on, of course, this was fastened to Greenland, and this was basically part of Greenland. So we had this fan-shaped spreading producing an offshore area. And then in Greenland itself, there was complementary fan-shaped spreading. There was a lot of diking, must have been a lot of lava flows. In fact, there are seaward dipping reflectors on this side. And eventually this situation didn't continue, and both the volcanism in this area here and this ridge became extinct. And it was transferred, extension was transferred to the Kolbeinse Ridge, which now functions as a kind of more or less normal mid-ocean ridge. Reykjanes Ridge, on the other hand, seemed to be a lot happier with its lot. It did a few funnies, which I won't go into here, but basically it chugged along and didn't do any wild jumping or producing any microcontinents. So here we have the magnetic anomaly map, and here you can see the fan-shaped magnetic anomalies around the Aya Ridge. So it's wide up here, and it's very narrow here. So as I say, it opened up like that. This is the Jan Mayen microcontinent, so there are no magnetic anomalies here. There are some pretty rough ones here, where you kind of see these wide, blobby, not very distinct red kind of things here, alternating with green. So we see some very indistinct sort of rough, large scale features where you can just about trace some linearity, but it's clearly not the same as the Kolbeinse Ridge here, where we see these very, very neat, regular magnetic stripes. So this region here is continental, and this region here is basically continental material, heavily shot with dikes, and maybe it had 2 or 3 rift zones which expanded for a while before waning and jumping and moving and so forth. To the south, about the Reykjanes Ridge here, we have beautiful regular magnetic stripes, so it's very easy to figure out the past spreading history of the ocean. This is just like the textbooks, and of course this is the location which was used by the original Vine-Matthews hypothesis to postulate the seafloor spreading hypothesis, so expect them to be pretty good. If we look at the continental edges over here, there again you can see, you can more or less pick out very broad, coarse, large scale linear features in the magnetic signal here, and we can see it on the other side here. But we know that these are continental regions, and these are associated with volcanism, emplacement of seaward dipping reflectors and magmatism that weakened and extended and influenced the continental crust prior to true seafloor spreading onsetting. And of course, you know, you probably noticed already that here on the Greenland-Iceland Ridge and the Iceland-Faroe Ridge, the magnetic anomalies are similar to these very messy, coarse, rough, broad, large-scale ones that we see on the regions of extended continental crust. So the magnetic anomalies are consistent with our hypothesis that much of this may be heavily magmatized continental crust. My colleagues and I did an exercise where we looked at these magnetic anomalies, and we drew up the ones which we're absolutely certain of, and we left blank the areas where it's very iffy. So if you pull a lot of diagrams down off the web, you'll see that people propagate across the, I call this the Greenland-Iceland-Faroes Ridge. They propagate across Greenland-Iceland-Faroes Ridge the anomalies for certain time periods. But to my mind, this is not safe because we do not see classic anomalies on this ridge. So we just drew where we were certain of these anomalies. And then we tried to figure out what might have happened in this area in the middle. I've also added to this diagram in blue lines, extinct rifts, and in red lines, currently active rifts. And of course, the gray is continental. So the Aia Ridge is extinct. We also know there are extinct ridges in Iceland. And for those of you going to Iceland, oh, of course, it's great fun to go and see the volcanic ridges and you know, eruptive fissures and things like that. But if you guys are interested in continental geology, structural geology, this more classical geology, then it might be of interest to go and look at the evidence for these extinct rifts, because these tend to be ignored, but there's a very important story in these. And furthermore, there's a whole bunch of them known offshore, one here, one here, one here, and several over here. So what it looks happened in this region is that what happened in this area here is essentially just a continuous, chronic, ongoing story of what happened to the north here. To the north, we know that there were several volcanic loci active for the first 20 million years or so. This one here and several down here. And then, you know, this system gave itself up and it became more regular seafloor spreading up here. But this kind of behavior here, I think this is still ongoing in this swathe here. I think we went quickly to regular seafloor spreading here, to the story that I've just described up here, and now to regular seafloor spreading. But here, I think spreading started off about multiple axes, probably two, this one and this one, say. These extended. And then when the dynamics required it, they became extinct. This one jumped here. This one jumped here. They spread for a while. They became extinct. Then this one jumped here. This one jumped here. So there was constant spreading and then jumping inwards, spreading, jumping inwards, spreading, jumping inwards. So we've really got diffuse spreading or diffuse extension about laterally migrating ridge segments here. And we still see this in Iceland at the present time. So a simplistic picture would have us all think that the mid-Atlantic ridge comes on shore here. There's some sort of transform here, and then it goes off here. There's another transform off here, and then it goes off on the Kolbeinsey Ridge. But it's much, much more complicated than that. We have double spreading here. We have another zone in the center of Iceland, which is generally ignored. We have an active volcanic belt here at 90 degrees to the spreading direction here, which has got on echelon rift zones in it and extensive post-glacial volcanics. There was a rift zone here that was active until 2 or 3 million years ago. And the so-called transform zone here and the so-called transform zone here, they're not transform zones. They cannot be described as transform faults. This one, for example, it generates large earthquakes, but the fault planes are all north-south. They're not east-west as you'd expect the transform. This zone up here is essentially a series of on-echelon rift zones which take up lateral motion that way. There is certainly no simple through-going transform. There may be 3 lineations, one of which comes on land and has produced damaging earthquakes in the past, but there's no surface. You know, we only know these from focal mechanisms. These systems are not sitting in one place. They're not stable. So you should enjoy yourselves. However, you know, Iceland's not a unique place. We see this kind of messy tectonics where ridges are jumping to and fro and not joining up with each other, even on the East Pacific Rise. So this is why I get up at 4 o'clock in the morning so I can welcome colleagues from Hawaii into my Zoom meetings, because they bring knowledge and information about the East Pacific Rise. And I think we were all surprised, every last one of us, when colleagues from Hawaii presented this kind of information and we compared it with Iceland, and we suddenly realized that there's really quite a striking similarity between the two. The Thulian land bridge. Okay, so as the North Atlantic opened and the whole area became an ocean, there was a land bridge which crossed from Greenland to Britain until the ocean was 1,000 kilometers wide. So this is 200 kilometers here. If we can imagine closing up the ocean by that amount, then at that point in time, you could have walked on dry land from Britain to Greenland. Now that's not very oceanic-like situation. And but it's very easy to explain this if this area here was underlain by a large amount of continental crust, instead of trying to fool around and trying to kind of fit a round peg into a square hole to argue that it's some kind of fancy oceanic crust. This is not how oceanic crust behaves. This is how continental crust behaves. It's also quite curious because I'm sure everyone here is aware that when Wegener proposed continental drift, one thing that his opponents said was that, oh, okay, so these fossils match from one side of the ocean to the other. Well, that could be because the little critters ran to and fro on long land bridges. And Wegener ruled out that happening. And he pointed to the Icelandic rift zones as the place where probably the continents were still rifting apart. But this was the one place, maybe the one place on Earth where it actually was true. There was a land bridge there. So we can't ever get too cocky when it comes to science. So taking a look at the continents. So people in the audience here may be more familiar with this sort of geology. And this is where I say that it's just so cross-disciplinary. You might think that to sort Iceland out, we want a lot of marine geophysicists and people who are well-versed in oceanic crust and so forth. But I think the key to these things lies on the continents, and it lies in structural geology. This is my opinion. These colored lines show orogenic features. So these red lines show the frontal thrusts of the Caledonian orogeny, which slammed shut about a while ago, 400 million years ago. So 400 million years ago, the previous proto-Atlantic Ocean closed, forming the Caledonian orogeny, and the western frontal thrust is in this position, and the eastern frontal thrust is in this position. So when the current North Atlantic opened up again, the new locus of spreading formed itself down the old Caledonian suture, but it didn't just run parallel down the suture. It actually ran away down the suture, and then the next branch was displaced to the west, and the next bit was displaced even further to the west. So it sort of formed in an en echelon pattern, not absolutely straight down the grain of the Caledonian suture. And at this latitude here, where Iceland later formed, it crossed the frontal thrust, the western frontal thrust of the origin, and the Reykjanes Ridge, propagating from south to north, it split the North American craton. So the Reykjanes Ridge splits the North American craton and probably cannot propagate further than about this point here. The Aya Ridge propagates south down the Caledonian Suture to about this point here, and it probably cannot cross the frontal thrust of the Caledonian Suture. And so there's a very difficult situation that happens in the middle. Structural geology colleagues have pointed out that this is in fact the confluence of two origins, the Caledonian origin here and the Nagsuttukudian origin in Greenland here. And they've also pointed out that there's a kind of mini Greenland, Iceland, Faroes ridge here, the Davis Strait, where the Nagsuttukudian orogeny joins with the Rinkian orogeny. So it may be that these places where origins come in confluence are important. So this is what we think happened. This band here is the western frontal thrust of the Caledonian orogeny as it was before breakup. And this is the situation after breakup. So we think that this structure just stretched basically like this. So we did some numerical modeling. We assumed that the western frontal thrust had got a structure something like this. Here we've got thickened continental crust, and underneath are a lot of slabs and stuff like this, which are causing the crust to be much thicker, sort of double thickness, if you like. And we modeled this as is shown here, and I'm trying to pause this so we can see. It's not working too well. Anyway, the pick here is continental crust. The green is mantle lithosphere, and this is the upper mantle, and this is the lower mantle. And let me see here. I'll run this again. Let me get my mouse back. Okay. Okay, I tried to pause it right at the beginning, but it's not worked. So I can't quite see how to pause it. So let's try something else. Okay, it's got it paused. So this is what we modeled. This is continental crust. This is lithospheric mantle. And we modeled the orogenic front as an additional 10-kilometer thick plate of eclogite at the base of the continental mantle. We then stretched it, and what happened is it kind of breaks into two, and each piece peels off because eclogite is heavy, and it sinks through the upper mantle, and the asthenosphere wells up in a counterflow to take its place. It warms, the asthenosphere comes into contact, it basically breaks the continental lithospheric mantle, and it comes into contact with the continental crust, warms it up, and enables it, it lowers its viscosity, if you like, and it enables it to flow for a kind of longer period than normal. So this has occurred basically because the sinking of this eclogite underplate, if we want to call it that, has resulted in a counterflow which comes up to the base of the crust and warms it up. So I can run it, and you can see these big blobs dropping off, hitting the base of the mantle transition zone and allowing a counterflow to well up in between. This will rerun itself. The orange areas are the regions where melt is generated. And it's quite interesting to see that because of the symmetry of this, we get two places where melt is forming. So you get a kind of double rift, if you like, which is quite extraordinary because we did not fiddle this. Actually, one person in our group had written this thermodynamic self-consistent code and had been running it for various scenarios. And this just happened to be one scenario which he had on the shelf when we started up this project. So we didn't sort of diddle around and make it fit the Iceland situation. This was just there. As I've mentioned, we think there are 2 rift zones. We see this geologically in and around Iceland. So in the next slide, I have taken a still here at 50 million years. So this is basically today. We stopped this simulation at 50 million years, which is approximately at the present time. And the important features are that the continental crust is still intact across. It's been warmed up, it's been injected with magma, and this has bulked it up volume-wise and enabled it to stretch. We have double zones of melt production. We still have a blob underneath here where there's still a bit of eclogite left, and still a bit of mantle lithosphere, but these are just details. Okay. So this is a kind of schematic that a colleague has produced, suggesting what the present day situation may be. And the mantle tomography, I put this in. I see I'm being a bit verbose and running over time here. Basically, the bottom line here is I've taken 4 mantle tomography models of various sorts, and we don't see very good repeatability. Some mantle tomography studies see nothing in the lower mantle. Other mantle tomography studies see things extending down to the core mantle boundary, and there's rather little similarity between many of these models. There's one thing that everybody agrees upon, and that is that the upper, say, 500 kilometers, there's a strong anomaly, and below that, the seismic anomalies are very weak. So I'll quickly move on to Yellowstone because I'm running behind time, and I'm sure there are people in the audience who know more than I do about this region, although I have published a few papers on the subject. So as you know, we have the Columbia River basalt, the flood basalt, and then we have a big mess of silicic and basaltic volcanism in a big zone further to the south. The thing that interests the Plume people, of course, is the time progression of silicic caldera forming volcanism along the eastern Snake River Plain, terminating in the current Yellowstone Plateau. This diagram kind of pulls out the regions of extension. It's my understanding that there's some 15 kilometers of crustal extension causing outpouring of the Columbia River basalts from these dike swarms here. And that subsequent to that, we have time progression of volcanism marked in millions of years by these numbers here, from 12 million years to the present time to Yellowstone, and from 10 million years to the present time to the Newberry volcano crater in the opposite direction. And I'm sure everybody is familiar with this, animation by Tanya Atwater, where she shows that the Juan Fuca plate is subducting under Western North America, and as it does so, it causes Western North America to go into extension, forming the Basin Range province of Nevada, of course, and extending this whole region. And as this runs again, if you keep your eye on this point here, where my pointer is, it hits the edge of North America here. And as it progresses northwestward, extension of the hinterland also progresses northwestwards. So we have a clear time progression of the tectonics there. Here we have the Basin Range province. And our idea for this is basically that when this started forming, to begin with, there was extension in the middle of the Basin Range province. this extensional axis quickly divided into two, and two axes, north-south axes, where the extension was more rapid, migrated to the east and west. So I was practicing doing this with my hands today, and I don't know if I can do it well, but we start off with extension in the middle, then we have extension to the east and west of that. It migrates further to the east and west, further to the east and west, and further to the east and west. So it's the axis of rapid extension that is, one is migrating to the east and one is migrating to the west. And the Eastern Snake River Plain is essentially the northernmost boundary of the Basin Range province, and that this extension, this migration of rapid extension coincides with eastward migration of silicic calderas, and of course there's the westward Newberry migration trend as well. So I've tried to show this schematically here, where we start off with rapid extension in the Basin Range province, less extension to the north of the Eastern Snake River Plain, and extension is taken up magmatically in the Eastern Snake River Plain. Some million years later, this system has become extinct, and the rapid extension occurs at this position here further east, and this position here further west, and then these become extinct, and the rapid extension has migrated still further to the east and west. I was kind of dragged into developing this model by Don Anderson, a famous geophysicist, who, when he realized that he was terminally ill, he asked his colleagues to finish off papers that he'd started. And I must have drawn the short straw, because I was told to get on and sort Yellowstone out. And I really came at this sort of backwards. So I thought to myself, well, you know, here we've been working on this plate model all this time, and what does the plate model predict that we should see? The plate model predicts that volcanism should occur where there's extension. Here we have time progressive volcanism. So this must, you know, if this is correct, it must mean that the extension has migrated. So I went to Google and I just typed in progressive extension along the Eastern Snake River Plain, and within 10 minutes I had found this. So although this was published, you know, 20 years before I developed this model, from my point of view, it was kind of a confirmation of my model, really, because I hadn't been aware of this work before. But what Anders and colleagues found out when they studied this, so here we have distance along the Eastern Snake River Plain from Yellowstone. Here's Yellowstone, and over here we have the older volcanoes. I get my laser pointer up. Laser, okay, there's the pointer. So here is time in millions of years, and these vertical bars, they've marked the time periods when the major Basin Range faults were at their most active. So back at whichever volcano this is, 200 kilometers down the Eastern Snake River Plain, this particular fault was active from, say, 10 to 6 million years. From closer to where Yellowstone is now, the Grand Valley faults were in rapid motion. And then the faults closer to Yellowstone were in rapid motion at a later point in time. And as we approach the present day, Yellowstone, we find that faults closer and closer to Yellowstone were active. So basically, this is exactly what the plate hypothesis would predict, that the most rapid motion on these great normal faults, which are causing extension, just got closer and closer to Yellowstone as we approach the present day. after I published my paper, these guys got together and they invited me for lunch at the AGU meeting so that we could discuss this model. So at least I got something out of it. Okay. So I went on a vacation in this area a while ago, and of course I went to the National Monument of the Craters of the Moon and saw these beautiful fissure zones. And it struck me that there was a amazing similarity with what we see in Iceland. You know, it's essentially the same. So it occurred to me that what's going on in the Eastern Snake River Plain is basically that we have a series of rowed up next to one another, a series of short fissure swarms of the same sort that we see in Iceland. So in Iceland, we also see extension going on around fissure swarms that may be 100 kilometers long, they may be 50 kilometers long. Each one has got a central volcano in the middle, and they tend to line up in on echelon patterns like this in the rift zones. You will see these if you're one of the lucky ones going to Iceland. And we also see lateral rift jumps. This one here, where the Grensdala system became extinct and it just jumped laterally to the adjacent Hengel system, this is one that I studied for my own PhD. And so, what we see in the Eastern Snake River Plain, that we see these typical fissure zones with fissure eruptions in the Eastern Snake River Plain and huge volcanoes in the middle of them, and then they become extinct and they migrate to the side. This is exactly what we see in Iceland and exactly something which I studied for my own PhD. So here's a set of them, for example. This is the Hengel system, and this is the Grensdala system here. So this idea could be tested using geodesy. So of course I pulled out the GPS data quickly in order to see what evidence there is for it. It's a very interesting pattern, but basically we have to bear in mind, again, it's very interesting to compare the Yellowstone system with Iceland. In Iceland, it's been a puzzle for a long time that surveying has been done across the rift zones, which we think should be opening at 2 centimeters a year. And for decade after decade, nothing would be seen, nothing. It might even contract a bit. And then there would be a vigorous volcanic episode where the rift zone would suddenly widen by 10 meters just in the space of 10 years, a meter per year. You get a meter per year, and then you get nothing for a couple of centuries. So it would be nice to test this in the Eastern Snake River Plain, but we may not be lucky enough to be able to do that in our lifetimes, because it can be a couple of centuries in between these massive extension episodes, and in between you don't see anything. So we have to rely, I think, in the Eastern Snake River Plain on structural geology. I should skip over these because I'm talking for too long, but basically the seismic tomography, unfortunately, these are different models for the same cross-section. And we can see the Eastern Snake River Plain, and we can see the North American Craton, blue here, red here. But anything underneath, if we want to look at anything underneath, then the repeatability is very poor between these models. So Yellowstone is right at this point here, where the Eastern Snake River Plain meets the North American Craton. And we clearly see that in every single one of these models. But if you want to look at deeper structures to see if there's some deeper structure, then the repeatability is not very good. So quickly for the wrap up, please visit mantleplumes.org. Marcia very kindly mentioned this website. It's got masses and masses and masses of stuff in it. You can click on one of these links here if you're interested in a particular province. Excuse me. You can click on one of these links if you're interested in dikes, or you're interested in seamounts or hotspots or anything like this. And you can click on these links up here if you want to hear about different theories that people have proposed. And I've published a summary of the Iceland story. There's also a summary of the Yellowstone story on the website. And I also published this book about 10 years ago. It desperately needs updating, but at least it's there and quite a big resource of information. And I just have one more slide to show, and that I thought I would share with this particular audience, because I'm sure all of us share in certain experiences, which I hardly need to talk about. But I came across this this rather interesting cartoon, which illustrated, some of the difficulties that women geoscientists face, and which everybody here hopes that we can protect our younger female colleagues from. And it's just reached out to me so much. I've just listed over here all of these barriers which somehow I had to stumble my way across. This is not theoretical, this is my own experience. So I'll just finish up with that, and thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Jillian. That was really interesting, and I think I'll have to watch the recording of it because I'll have to look at parts of it again. I'm going to open the floor to questions, and so far there's one in the chat. Can you repeat why there was that slab of eclogite near the surface in your Iceland animation?
Because at the place where Iceland formed, the North Atlantic was breaking up. It broke up to the south, it broke up to the north, but at the place where these two rifts couldn't come together, this was the frontal thrust. There was this transverse structure. So we've got the frontal thrust of the Caledonian suture here. The northern rift is propagating south. The northern rift is propagating like this. The southern rift is propagating like this. And the two could not break across this barrier. And this barrier was probably a mass of the very latest slab material that's subducted prior to the two continents slamming together. These were basically trapped slabs. This was an orogenic front, and so it was greatly thickened continental lithosphere with a lot of slab material embedded. And I think this was so strong that the two rifts could not propagate across. And since it was a slightly unusual situation, because one rift was propagating in one direction, the other was propagating in the other direction. It wasn't as though one rift was propagating and trying to go in one way. It was two opposing rifts, and they were offset by 50 to 100 kilometers. So they simply couldn't join up, given the additional strength of this and the thickened nature of the lithosphere just at that point. So we put this thickened slab is supposed to represent the last subducted slabs, that were there at the time. I mean, the slide I showed of let me share my screen again. Where are we? This is what a modern origin looks like. This is a cross section of the Himalaya. So the ridges were trying to propagate across something that it looks like today's Himalaya, with all this garbage down there.
Okay. There's a comment that we're glad you persisted through that escalator. I had never seen I'd never seen that cartoon. That's wonderful.
You know, I was asked at one talk I gave, I was asked to give some sort of talk on how I managed to have a career, you know, so there was 100 young students in the class, half of them women, of course, and I kind of I put together my scientific talk in 10 minutes flat, but this I just couldn't think of what to say to them, and I came to the conclusion that there's nothing special about me. You know, they say, oh, you know, what was it you did, and what were your qualities, what did you do to manage to succeed where so many fail? And I think it was just random, because I don't think I'm not really different from any other student, you know, who wants a career and so forth. I was just the lucky one that happened to filter through. You know, we know that women of our generation, you know, 9 out of 10 of us who aspired were just filtered out, and I just happened randomly to be the one that wasn't. So, you know, I don't think, you know, to say to the others who you know, were unable to carry on with their careers, to say to them, well, oh, I did X, I did Y, you know, I was persistent and such, and so I didn't let anything stop me. I mean, to me, that's just sort of blaming them for not having been able to carry on, when we know what happens. You know, most of us were filtered out.
Yeah. Although without the persistence piece, you filtered yourself out. But yeah, there's a lot of barriers still, and I think there are a lot of young women who aren't quite aware of just how many landmines there can be in your path. And I think it's actually probably worse for academia. So
It's not anything they're doing that is causing the problem. If, you know, if we turn around and say, well, you know, you stumbled at this point, that's like victim blaming to me.
yeah.
It's a system we have to go after.
All right. Here's another question about the talk. It seems Hawaii is nowhere near a mid-ocean ridge. Is it different?
It has to be, yeah. Hawaii's completely unique. So I think this takes us right back to the beginning. You know, when Jason looked at Hawaii and said, well, you know, this is an example of a general thing. I think that's where the mistake came in. Hawaii is completely unique. There's no other place on earth that's like Hawaii. Hawaii is like the opposite of Iceland. Hawaii is smack in the middle of a plate. Sorry, Hawaii is smack in the middle of a plate. Iceland's on a ridge. Hawaii's got a beautiful time progressive trail. Iceland doesn't.
Okay.
So, you know, Hawaii, the time progressive trail behind Hawaii, the Emperor, you know, the very oldest part of the Emperor chain, that started on a ridge. And then the locus of excess volcanism migrated away from the ridge into the center of the plate. Whereas at the latitude of Iceland, the volcanism has always been on the ridge.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing with Iceland, you know, if this theory is correct, then there probably is maybe just a little bit, but very little excess volcanism in Iceland, because if this is correct, and much of the thick crust under Iceland is continental, we don't have excess magnetism there. We just have the normal mid-ocean ridge amount.
Mm-hmm.
So you know, the much of the substratum, the crust under Iceland is 40 kilometers thick. 40 kilometers. Okay, oceanic crust is 6 kilometers thick. Under Iceland, it's 40 kilometers thick, and we're supposed to believe that this is, you know, just some different kind of special thick oceanic crust. Well, sorry, that's just completely out of the question for, you know, half a dozen different geophysical and geological reasons. I think much of this is continental. It's probably magma inflated, but what you guys are going to see when you go out to Iceland, you're going to see basically what is oceanic crust, which is just icing on top of this stuff. Oh, someone's giving me the thumbs up. Thanks.
Well, I'm the one who wrote a comment, but I was in Iceland probably 10 years ago now, maybe a little longer. And I saw rhyolitic flow banding in rocks when I was hiking. And I never could understand how that, until you just said what you said, that there's continental crust there.
Yeah, there's actually a lot of rhyolite on Iceland, and I've wondered about that too. And people will say, well, that's, it's partial melting of that thick basaltic pile, but
yeah, I know.
so much. I mean, you see a little teeny bit of rhyolite on Hawaii, but it's just so much on Iceland.
Yeah.
Well, this is the last frontier. We published a special issue in Earth Science Reviews, a bundle of about I think there were 6 or 8 papers on all aspects of this. And if anybody would like a hard copy of that special issue, I meant to bring one in to the Zoom room to show you, but send me your name and address, email me your name and address, and I'll mail you out a hard copy. It's a special issue of Earth Science Reviews, about, I don't know, 100 pages long or something, with all of this covered. But the one thing that we didn't get around to was interpreting the geology and the petrology of Iceland. And that is still something that remains to be done. So, if several of you are interested in that, I would be very interested in working with you on that. The petrologists in our group at the time when we ran this particular program, they were very busy looking at temperature estimates of the magma source, and they didn't get around to interpreting, the fact that 10% of Icelandic rocks are andesites, basically, or rhyolites. 10% of Icelandic rocks are silicic.
Yeah.
So Jillian, one of the reasons I like to set it up so people have to register is that then I get everybody's email. So if you want to send something to me and then I can send it out to everyone, that will work well, and probably not fill up your inbox.
Oh yeah, that would be fine. I mean, my inbox is always full, I can tell you. I somehow
fill up my inbox instead. Mindy, would you like to unmute yourself and ask your question? You have some, I'm not sure I can read it. You've got some abbreviations in there.
Sure. I just wanted to tell Jillian that was a wonderful talk overall, and we definitely relate to things. My question was about some of the things we've run into on our field trip, and it was the metamorphic core complexes and décollement situation. And I've asked many people, for example, the Monashee, just west of Revelstoke, it's a metamorphic core complex, Eocene one. But I just wanted to know what was under it. And nobody could actually tell me. And I just wondering if you might lend some insight into that. And then also the décollement, because there was a detachment fault that moved the crust 100 kilometers to the east, the upper part, over that to below. But then you had this core complex open due to extension in the Eocene. And there's a lot of conflicting things in the literature, and it seemed related to what you were saying with extension.
Where is this location?
It's in British Columbia, just north of Washington. It's but it's similar to the metamorphic core complexes due to Eocene extension. You'd get it further south in Western US.
I'd have to take a look at the situation there. Is it possible this is somehow related to back arc extension, so to speak? Because is this is just on land, and I don't know, I don't have a map in front of me, but what's the how far offshore is the spreading plate boundary from that location, or are you still at this subduction zone part?
Oh yeah, it's just north of eastern Washington, just east of the Okanagan.
Oh, okay, it's quite a long way inland then.
Yeah.
And Eocene, you say?
Yeah.
I'm afraid that's not quite my stomping ground, but if you could send me some material, I'd be happy to take a look and see if I could come up with something.
Sure, that would be great. Some earlier publications had said, oh, there's mantle plume coming up under it. There's a mantle warping. If you really looked under, you'd find igneous thing, but there hasn't been any volcanism along it. And the thought is, the crust is thin.
That won't stop them, Mindy. They'll just say it's a mantle plume that hasn't erupted, or it's a dry mantle plume, or it's a geochemical mantle plume, or something like this. You cannot disprove the mantle plume hypothesis, because whatever you observe, they'll say, "Oh, the plume did that." If you're seeing intraplate extension there, I mean, that's actually quite interesting. I mean, according to the plate theory, how much and what magma you get if there's intraplate extension depends on what's down there at the ready. So we know that the temperature of the mantle varies from place to place, and the composition of the crust and the contents of the crust, the volatile contents of the lower crust, vary from place to place. So you can extend a region and you might get no volcanism if it's cool, if it's volatile, poor, and there's no melt available, the crust will extend in a dry fashion, so to speak. So I don't know, it would be interesting to see what evidence there is for extension and how much extension might have occurred, and whether the conditions were such, whether the geotherm was cool, for example, so that you wouldn't expect there to be a lot of melt available. So you just get exhumation of the lower crust, and you wouldn't get volcanism.
Yeah, thanks. I'll send you that. The thing is that they had a detachment fault and then it came up. So even though they say it should be a normal fault on either side, it's actually mapped as a thrust fault on one side. So there's a lot of odd things. Maybe it was a sequence of events, but anyway, I think it relates to what you were saying and the importance of extension and all this. So thank you.
Linda, you had a question, and I think you should ask it rather than my reading it.
Are you talking to me, Marcia?
Yes.
Yeah, so I saw, thank you, Jillian. Thank you. It's amazing. I saw your talk, Jillian, or Dr. Folger, however you prefer.
Oh, Jillian, fine.
A couple of years ago. I don't remember who you were talking to, but it was a webinar. And you were describing Iceland, and you came to this point where you had, and I've got a piece of paper here, where you had a rift system coming from north to south, and then offset by a rift system going from south to north. So this is the Ayer, and this is the Ricanus, right? And you said that while you can imagine pulling each one of these apart separately, you can't pull across the middle, right? One hand,
Exactly,
the
yeah.
other. Okay, I'll tell you this, hang on. This is a bill I don't need to keep. So I can't pull across the middle. So you get rifting in one direction, rifting in another direction, but you can't pull across the middle. And my question relates to the question about the eclogite and the solidity, the intact, the continental material in between. Now, when I saw that demonstration you gave, it
Oh, you're frozen, Linda. Oh no.
a model that you work with.
Yeah, I think this is Congratulations on remembering that. That's
Oh,
quite memorable.
It like bang like this. So yeah, it
Oh,
was big.
Okay, maybe I should use that more then. But no, I think that's spot on. And you know, if you can imagine this middle part being quite strong, you just
Yeah.
simply it would just deform. It wouldn't you know, break.
It won't rift.
Yeah, I
So
think
in that deformation, is there enough deformation? If this is continental material here, is there enough deformation in this continental material, enough extension, in other words,
yeah.
to encourage volcanism of a quote unquote hotspot variety rather than a rifting variety?
Well, as I say, if this theory is correct, then the volcanism that we see in Iceland is just the sort of 6 to 10 kilometers that you normally get at you know, this whole hotspot business. But for one thing, there's very little evidence that any of these hotspots are hot. The only place where there's some really strong evidence of quite high temperatures is Hawaii, funnily enough. At no other so-called hotspot is there really any convincing evidence that it's hot. So this is a complete misnomer, really. In the case, so people see magma, they see eruptions, and they say, "Oh, it must be hot," you know, because there's volcanics here and not there. It must be that it's hot here. But you know, we say no, that's not necessarily true. You've got extension there, so the volcanics can actually leak out. Over there, you don't have extension, so any melt is contained in the crust. It's down there, but it just can't come up to the surface. So in Iceland, again, you know, people see volcanoes everywhere, rift zones, flood basalts forming. And, whoa, it must be really hot down there in the mantle. But I don't think there's any more, you know, at least there might be 10% more, say, for various reasons, but there isn't a massively great extra amount of volcanism there compared with what you see at normal sea floor. So, you know, to call it a hotspot and to say there's super huge amount of volcanism at Iceland, well, that's just not true. I think it's relatively normal oceanic crust type amount.
So a follow-up question is, can we expect to see granitic rocks in Iceland?
Well, how do you test this hypothesis? We've come up with 4 ways in which we could try to test the hypothesis. One would be by drilling down there, but of course that's kind of fantasy, really. You'd have to go down possibly 10 kilometers. That would be very expensive. Another way is by collecting zircons and seeing if we can find continental aged zircons, you know, zircons from the Mesozoic and Paleozoic. So that project would be 2 years into working if it hadn't been for COVID. We've got all the money in place and so forth, and I'm hoping to get out there in September and collect some. The other is to do yet another geophysical survey. So one incredible thing about this is that there's been a huge amount of seismic surveying, explosion seismology, refraction seismology, earthquake seismology, receiving functions, this, that, and the other, tomography. And, you know, I'm a seismologist. My PhD was earthquake seismologist. And we seismologists, we can't tell the difference between oceanic crust and continental crust. And that's a fact. And just so that we don't feel quite so bad about ourselves, I can say that geochemists cannot tell the difference between whether the melt source is here or there. And geochemists will look at the geochemistry and they'll say, oh, this has got the signature of the core mantle boundary. Well, that's complete rubbish. They cannot tell. And we seismologists are equally blind. I think we've kind of prided ourselves that we can probe more accurately and more precisely deep in the mantle than we can. And you know, I really think that it's you know, time for a bit of realism. So it's actually quite shocking, you know, to realize that seismology, anyway, getting back to the point, if you fail 10 times, what better way forward than to do another experiment? So there's this one big geophysical survey that hasn't been done yet in Iceland, and that is electrical surveying. You know, if seismology can't tell and geochemistry can't tell, and even if we put the two together, we still can't tell. Maybe if we throw yet another parameter, we can try and reduce the ambiguity here. That's what it's all about. So there's a lot of interest, for not just for this reason, in doing a big Iceland-wide electrical survey. And again, the money's there, and the only thing that's stopping us is COVID, I'm afraid. So there's a number of ways in which we're trying to test this hypothesis.
All right. Does anyone else have any questions?
I'm afraid I haven't been looking at the chat box because I can't do that and answer questions at the same time. So is there something I missed, Marsha? Then
well, Roberta notes that we need at least a week for a seminar to really get our heads around this.
Linda, I answered. Mindy, I answered. Roberta needs a week.
Oh, I know. I have a question. Do you have any other YouTube videos or fairly simple accounts of the conflict or the discussion between the plume and the anything else we can watch?
Okay, let
on
me
this topic?
yeah.
And I'm not a professional. I'm not a professional geologist, so keep it simple, stupid.
Okay, let me take you on a tour. Share.
And I don't
Okay.
need it right at the moment. You can just send it to Marcia.
Well, if I can you see my
Dunes.
my browser
I see
here?
your sand.
Yes.
I
Oh, we
see
see
your
your
sand
dunes.
dunes.
Okay, if we go to mantleplumes.org here, then you see all these things here. You know, I tried to make this more professional once, and one of the old greybeards in the group complained because I took all the cartoons off, and he said all the cutesy thingies had gone, so I had to put them all back again. But you can click on each of them and they'll take you to stuff. So if you click on this one, videos,
We're not seeing it. We're just seeing the sand dunes.
the sand dunes.
Yeah.
Okay, let me try sharing again.
And should we take a picture of your screen? Is that the easiest way to do it, do you think?
Can you see my browser window now?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes.
mantleplumes.org, yes.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So
So
you can click on all of these links, and they'll take you to links which talk about various aspects of it. You can click on plume theory here. This was written by a plume advocate colleague. You can click on plate theory here. That will tell you about plate theory. Okay. And if you want to teach it, there's a special one about teaching it there, telling you how I used to teach it. And if you want videos, you click on this video link here. So I don't know if you saw where I clicked. You can click on these pictures. It'll take you to various things.
Yeah,
and here
that's good.
Links to numerous lectures. Some are short, some are long.
Great, thank you very much.
On YouTube, there are also a couple of presentations that Jillian has given to other organizations. I think the Jackson Hole Geologic Society.
I think I may have, did I put this?
Have included.
Yeah, here it is, a plate model for Yellowstone.
Oh, yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
and yeah, so they're both up on this. I think I've got just about everything up here, Marsha, because I try to keep it all up in one place. And for people who maybe not professional geologists. If you click on related links, oh, wait a minute, here you go, popular articles, the coffee mug and the newspaper here. If you click on that, I try to keep here links that appear in newspapers, magazines, and things which are not kind of professional papers. So
Okay, thank you very much. This
click on
should
one
do
of
it.
those, and there's a science article there.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Jillian. And I'd like to thank everybody for taking time out of a Saturday afternoon to come and see the talk. Yay!
It was really good, really interesting. It's going to be so helpful when we go to Iceland this summer. Thank you so much.
I was a little
Thank you.
disappointed that Tammy didn't come, but I'll tell her to watch the recording.
Mhm.
Otherwise, we'll be talking about this and she'll be going, what?
Well, maybe we should have another Zoom call with you guys after you come back from Iceland. We can talk about
Ooh.
Iceland.
Ooh, yes, that could be very good.
That'd be
And
awesome.
if there are people amongst you who are inspired to look at the petrology and the geology of Iceland from the point of view of, in fact, I and a colleague at the University of Brest in France, we're just about to interview for a PhD position for a student to reinterpret the structural geology of Iceland in view of this model. So, you know, hopefully we'll get the ball rolling on a geological project to reinterpret Iceland. So if anybody's interested, then please do get in touch.
And it looks like Linda is advocating another talk about Hawaii.
Yeah, that's a very interesting subject. Very interesting. Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks a lot. I'm going to stop recording.